there's a pane of glass separating my mom and dad right now. They were emotional. It got me emotional. I get emotional even thinking about it right now. It's like to remove that connection, the ability to hug someone and feel their skin and be in their presence. That was something we all lost for a period of time. And you know what? We didn't know when we were getting it back. So at that time, I launched something that allowed people who didn't have that connection to connect with others.
This is the Home of Healthspan podcast, where we profile health and wellness role models, sharing their stories and the tools, practices, and routines they use to live a lively life. Don, it is great to see you again after eudaimonia. I have to say, I was feeling really good about myself one morning before a workout with you, heading to the gym at 6:30, and then you were on your way out. I was like, man, there's this other level. There's this whole other level. But
fun.
Before we jump into you and everything you do, how would you describe yourself?
I would describe myself. I'm a lively, first off, coach. That's where my business, that's where my career started. I've been coaching 26 years. Now I've definitely become somewhat of an entrepreneur in the business of fitness. So I never like saying that because it sounds like very like whatever, but yeah, it's the reality of it. Branding, marketing, all that stuff in fitness has been something I've become passionate about, but I love helping companies out and I love helping out people. Yeah.
And I think for anyone who hasn't gotten to do a workout with Don, that becomes immediately apparent spending just a minute or two with you. I remember in the first workout, you were talking about your program and a lady was like, yeah, I'm in it. And you're like, don't I respond to every message you send, right?
Yes.
It is about that impact,
right?
Which is inspiring. So what got you into that in the first place?
I was a collegiate baseball player, played at Sacred Heart University, had a great 4 years there, started for 3 years. It was a small Division I program, but loved it. And obviously, like every other athlete, has aspirations on playing beyond that. But while I was in college, I almost felt like I was majoring in business while playing baseball, but minoring in fitness, nutrition, training, when I didn't even really know this existed out there. I was training for sport, but I was also training because it made me feel a certain way. So I absolutely loved it and became just somewhat obsessed over it. Like almost became known as the guy at my university where like everyone was actually asking me the questions, not the strength and conditioning coaches. And it was funny, even my collegiate coach, Nick Giaquinto, who I actually just saw this summer, he won a Super Bowl with the Washington Redskins. He's a football player, but a baseball coach. And I remember him looking at me at one point and we had like a team workout and he's like, just do your own thing. Like the guys don't want to work out with you type of thing. Like where they're doing their thing. You could just go do your own thing. And I laughed and I was like, okay, that's great. Thinking back on it now, I'm kind of like, well, is that not good? I was a captain. So was that not a good thing? But what I realized is that, coach the guys were just scared to work out with me and they just didn't want to they knew if I was in there, I was going to push them at a certain level. And coaches just like, just do your own thing, which is, I think, a much different approach than most coaches would take. But listen, it worked for the team and I had a great relationship with them. But when I graduated, and I was thinking about where my career is going to go, I graduated with a degree in business. I worked at a catering hall for 10 years of my life. So I really understood customer service and I was obsessed with nutrition, supplementation, training. I just had a simple conversation with my mom and she's like, aren't there these trainers out there? And I'm like, yeah, they don't make money. And she's like, yeah, don't worry about the money. Just, you're going to figure it out and you'll create something and you're going to be great at what it is you do. And, now 26 years later, here we are.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to step back into that because we're similar age and I was Division I swimmer and at least where I was, and even some of the other programs I did, swimming was just grinding. Right.
Okay.
Like there wasn't much technique. There wasn't much thought on the strength training. It was just hours in the pool, getting the yardage in. And there wasn't thought, we didn't have a nutritional coach. We didn't know anything about it.
Right.
So what was it that made you realize, hey, there may be more science, there may be better things on this fitness side that I can unlock levels that aren't available if I just
every day, because every day I was finding out new things, and I think back, to before I became professional at this, and I started working out when I was 16, and I'm just lifting weights. And at that time, I remember I was a pitcher in high school, but went off to be played outfield in college. And I remember I didn't want to do arms because I thought that was going to mess my elbow up, right? Like there's just, misconceptions that you have. And out of nowhere, I remember a buddy looking at me being like, come on, man, we got to get our protein in. And I was like, what's that? He's like, and he explained it to me. I'm 16. I'm like, oh, great. Where are we going to go get that? He's like, let's go to the pizza joint. They had meatballs there. I'm like, great. So we went, we got pasta and meatballs, right? And the next thing you know, you're at that time, you're like, well, egg whites, great source of protein. Eat your egg whites. And then it's like, well, the yolk's good, right? It's your amino acid profile improves so much with the yolk and you good fats, et cetera. And it was just every day just became this like quest where I surrounded myself with a lot of people who knew a lot. I became this sponge where I just wanted to speak to people and train with people. If you were a healthy cook, I wanted to sit there and listen to and look at how you prepare things and how you meal prep. Like it's just every day. And to this day, I'm as excited now to learn and to speak to people as I've ever been. And, I've got a lot of hours under my belt at this point.
Yeah.
I got a lot of businesses that I'm a part of or I've started, and I think it's fun. But my training is as serious now as it's ever been. And I'm not saying it's more serious than I was when I was 25. No, it's as serious. It really is. Like I approach sets like I did when I'm 25. There's things I do differently now with recovery. And there's things I'm thinking about differently with sleep. And if I feel like my body's not catching up, what do I do? Back then, when you're 25, you're just like, you'd be sore as shit walking around, like hobbling across Broadway. And you're like, oh my God, I'm dying. And the next day you're like, oh, I feel great. If I train that hard, which I like to train hard, it's not, 1 or 2 days, it's, 5 or 6 days and that you got to be careful about. So yeah, I think that's when I fell in love with this. This was a profession for me. I really felt like you can control so much, right? Like the more you learn and the more attention you put to detail here, the better position you're going to be in, right? Most of the time, like you can go and prepare and hit in a batting cage for 10 hours a day. You still strike out. It's still going to happen. But with what I'm doing now, I feel like, well, the more prepared I am with my nutrition and my training and my sleep, like good things are going to happen. Granted, tragedies hit and things happen. And I've lost a bunch of people in my life. And when that happens, it's abrupt. And yeah, you gotta downshift and learn how to, acclimate, and you got to be malleable. But all in all, like that's one of the reasons why I was became so passionate about this at a young age.
You talked about your training now is as intense as when you were 25, but I imagine maybe the goals behind it could be different. What would you say your goals now are when it comes to your health? Like, what are your objectives?
Ironically, the goal isn't, to put on muscle at all costs, right? I am not interested in being 240 pounds. I'm 6'1". I'm 215 pounds. My body fat's really low all year long, but the goal is still muscle. Like, let me be very clear about that. Like, how do I stay as lean as possible while I'm putting on muscle? And while I'm doing that, how is my energy high? And how can I move? And how can I wake up and how can I feel good? And how can I have high levels of energy? Like I had a hockey game at 7 a.m. this morning, right? I play, outdoor hockey this time of year, 3-4 days a week, right? So, and I'm lifting, I have like 4 primary lift days a week right now. I'll have 2 lower, I'll have 2 upper. I cut the volume down a bunch, but I'm still training hard and I'm still trying to get stronger right now. And I'm still, I got to think about my meals. I prep, I measure macros. These are things that I've always done. But the goal, I always think muscle is something that, we should always be trying to achieve. If you lose muscle, that's like, getting rid of your 401k plan, right? That's muscle is something that's our body armor. Muscle's our future. Muscle is what's going to help protect us and prepare us and help and allow our metabolism to, potentially be efficient. And, I think people undervalue the importance of muscle. They think of muscle as like the bodybuilder sitting here flexing and unable to move. I'm like, no, like muscle's the guy who's 215 pounds with single digit body fat that can run through a wall and it can get up and be strong and feel good. And that's muscle the right way. Let's just put it that way. I mean, and for bodybuilders, I don't want to say it's the wrong way. Please don't get that twisted here. It's like, that's their job and that's what they're doing. But for me, there's a functionality component to the way that I move and the way that I feel and the things that I want to do in life that, I have to just, treat my body a bit differently than most.
I think you bring up a good point in that like the specific motion of pitching may not be universal. And getting the perfect peak on your biceps, not universal, but the need for muscle increases with age. And, one of the workouts we did was with Dr. Lyon, who's forever strong, like very much around how important this is, especially for older adults. And so it's not just an aesthetic thing, right? Like this is for
why do we want? We're all getting older. Our bone density statistically might start declining. Our muscle is going to start declining. Why do we want to give up on that? Why do we want to lose that? I got out of the DEXA scan right before Thanksgiving, and I saw that my numbers over a certain period of time, I put muscle on. That's great. And there are times in my training and my career where I've lost muscle because maybe nutritionally I'm eating great, but I'm not eating enough of what it is that I need. And maybe because of work and stress, I'm not recovering the way that I need, or maybe my volume is too high. And I think it is if you want to be that specific about it, and you're that concerned, I think, measuring specific things and giving yourself quantifiable numbers that now know how to adjust. For me, that's important. I've turned around and I've for 4 or 5 months training's been great, nutrition's been great, and I've found out that I've lost some muscle. I'm like, well, why? And I've spent my career looking at this, and but the average Joe out there, they're not going to know these things. They're not going to understand, and they're just like, oh no, I eat well. I eat my protein and I eat my vegetables, and I have my sweet potato, and I exercise and I do all these things, and that's awesome, and that works for many people. But for someone like me, getting that additional data is just helpful, and it's fun for me. It's what I enjoy doing. It's not what I'm telling everyone they should do, but this is it's a way of me gamifying things, and it keeps things fun, and it keeps me working towards a goal.
Well, and it's also difficult to know if you don't have a way of keeping score. You have no idea if you're on the right track, if what you're doing is effective or not. So you mentioned a DEXA scan. What else do you do that tracks? Like what other things do you use?
No, I mean, listen, I've done every way of measuring body fat, and I'm not even going to tell you that DEXA is the most accurate. I think everything is a bit flawed, to be honest. I've been able to manipulate in bodies. I still have skin calipers in my desk. I've done hydrostatic weighing. I've done bioelectrical impedance machines. I've tried it on. I've done it all. It's like my recommendation is if you're going to use one way of measuring, use that one way of measuring. If someone's going to test, make sure you're going back to that same person to test. Use it as data to be able to make good decisions, but don't use it if you're going to obsess and lose sleep over it. Like the example is I have a friend recently. I love Oura Ring. I've been a part of the company for a long time. And he turned around. He's like, I want to get an Oura. I'm just like, okay. So he gets an Oura. And I'm like, how do you sleep, by the way? He's like, unbelievable. I was like, wow. He's like, no, seriously, unbelievable. Just before he put the Oura on. And I'm like, well, what's your sleep like? He goes, Don, my head hits the pillow at 9 and I wake up at 6. I don't even use the bathroom. And I'm like sitting there like salivating, like, oh my God, how nice must that be? And then he puts an Oura on his finger and he starts thinking about the numbers too much. And now he starts waking up. He calls me up. He's like, what do I do? I'm like, give the Oura to your partner. And like, like, it's just, you're the one person that I don't recommend it for. Like, you don't like, and I love it. And I use it. And there's so much great data that I get from it, but like not everything is for everyone. And I think it's very easy to sit here and listen to me and go, well, that's, Don's a little hardcore about this. It's how I want to live. It's what I love. It's what I enjoy doing. And I like, and trust me, I have my late nights. My son and I were at UFC a few weeks ago. I didn't get home till 3 a.m. I'm resilient, felt tired the next day, bounced back, got a good night's sleep Monday night, was back on track, right? I'm not talking about the occasional night, but I like being in bed early, and I like just getting up and getting my nutrition and getting some work done and training. Like there's a very monotonous tone to the way that I like to live daily. And but there's other exciting things in there. There's travel and there's family and there's all this other stuff. But I feel like when I'm home, I can prepare for those times.
I mean, it's a freedom in discipline. If you're getting 80 to 90% of it locked in, I'm doing all the right stuff. Exactly. You have the flexibility without really damaging your health and your
exactly. I totally agree with you there.
So your training schedule now, it sounded like you have 4 weight days, 2 upper body, 2 lower, and then you're playing hockey 3 or 4 times.
So so I have 2 up right now. I have 2 upper, I have 2 lower. I have an accessory day, which is really more like mobility, abs, hockey right now this week, it's Tuesday. It's only Tuesday, Friday, Saturday. But I got to look at my schedule weekly because if there's a day that gets cut back, sometimes it is an extra, but I really try and keep it to 3. But I might throw a steady state day in there more for recovery, more like a zone 2 day. Or if it gets cut down and I have the opportunity, maybe it's a rain day where we can't get on the ice, I might I might do some steady state into some structured intervals because I find that like I can get into higher zones that I can't get into in hockey because, hockey's a lot of stop go, but it's also a lot of playing positions and not always, going all out. I find that my interval work, I can push a lot harder than hockey because it's not like every 30 seconds we're going again. Like who knows when we're going again. It depends on the play. So yeah, I think week by week right now with the cardio component, that's kind of what has to adjust a bit according to my schedule and according to my energy. But the resistance training piece, yeah, it's been my body feels great.
And on each of those, so the resistance training, is that mostly kettlebells, dumbbells, barbells?
No, it's all the above. It is structured. Monday right now is lower. It's more of a squat day. Thursdays, more of a deadlift day. I've been doing a lot of deficit deadlifts lately.
When you say deficit deadlift, like you're on a platform and
small, 1 inch. Okay. Yeah, I started the last 4 weeks with like a snatch grip deadlift, which you got to get a lot lower. And then this week it's a deficit on a conventional and I'll progress out of that. So I've been working a lot on deadlift technique and that's feeling really good. So, and then I'll go into some additional legs Thursday. So we got that Monday. Monday's more of your squat leg day and Thursday's more of your deadlift leg day. Tuesday's more of my Tuesday and Friday are both upper body days, but I might be more dominant with, say, horizontal pressing on Tuesday and more vertical pressing on Thursday, on Friday, but still, mixing in some, horizontal pressing on Friday as well. So they just kind of flip flop a bit and making sure that I'm not, hammering the living crap out of volume. But, when I hit my sets, I'll do my warm up or my feelers or whatever it is. And then if it just says 2 sets for an exercise, it's getting down to business and getting in and out of that session. But I start every session with probably 10 to 15 minutes of mobility. So just kind of getting that body to floss a bit. And today I had to go from hockey to work to training. So again, making sure I get those meals in. And I know after hockey, what really has been helping me a lot, and it's funny because there's so much conflicting information on it, like cold plunging, right? Well, don't do it after lifting because it's going to blunt hypertrophy. I'm like, okay, no problem. It almost reminds me of microwaves, right? Like, but I've been doing it. Some people are like, no, I use it for convenience and I have to use it. And other people are like, I don't use it. I don't use microwaves because I just don't need to. And I'm like, well, whether there is or there isn't, I'm still going to just heat my food up on a skillet. Cold plunging for me after hockey has been one of the best things I think I've incorporated into my hockey regimen for, I've been playing since I'm 7 years old. So I think, over the last probably 5 to 10 years, my hips would always get sore, was always stretching, was always doing the things I need to do. But I've been doing it now right after hockey. And I pretty much like hours later, don't even feel like I played in the morning. So that itself has been big for me. Would I do it after lifting? No. 3 minutes, probably throwing it in a few days a week, whatever. But it works great for me.
There's a trade-off there, right? Like maybe it's hurting on the hypertrophy, but that's not why you're playing hockey in the first place. And if it's helping on the recovery to get you back on the ice and perform better, like that's a trade-off. You're saying, hey, I'm going in eyes wide open.
100%. Let me explain something. I've been doing cold plunging, not for a year, not for 5 years. I've been cold plunging for over 25 years. I started cold plunging in the city, I think at the Russian bathhouse back in like 1999. Like I've been religious and I live downtown. I've been religiously doing it then. I've been on the cover of Muscle and Fitness 3 times in the last 4 or 5 years. I've been on over a dozen covers. My hypertrophy is just fine.
I've seen your arms, right?
I'm okay. But that's why I'm saying it's like you get these sports scientists and they run in a specific direction and you got to weigh things. What's more important to you? If I had to get on stage, well, my body feels like shit all the time. Am I going to start prioritizing this a little bit? If it works for me, but it's taking away from hypertrophy, where do you prioritize things? Yeah. That is the question. So, I feel like it's irresponsible for a lot of professionals to come in and start bashing things that can be good for people. I heard a biohacker recently turn around and talk about how ice cream's better, how oatmeal is worse for you than ice cream. And I was like, that's just irresponsible. Like
whole grains are going to be worse
yeah,
than refined
it's the
sugars.
stupidest thing. Well, whoa, it's gonna spike your blood sugar level more than ice cream. I'm like, listen, you are irresponsible. I lost respect for this individual. I thought it was absolutely a terrible message. I thought it was terrible information. And you have someone, you know, living in the Midwest who suddenly is like, well, my doctor says I need more fiber. And now I'm having a cup of oats every morning, and that's giving me an additional 10 grams of fiber. You're going to tell him to eat ice cream now? Like, seriously? Like, but that's how powerful people are on the internet. And this is what people are exposed to. Like, it's not it's not the average consumer's job to know what's right and what's wrong out there. They're going to see the guy with their shirt off and go, oh, wow, what does this person do? Right. And I think if someone's an influencer or they're a coach and they're two different things, you still have a responsibility to, you know, understand that people are watching, and the information you're giving can really set someone off on a tailspin. It's funny. The longer I'm in this profession now, it gets more difficult for me to answer questions. When someone asks me a question now, it's never this direct answer of like, do this. Like, I have to fire back like 3 or 4 questions before I can even, you know, maybe point them in the right direction.
Yeah. What are your goals? What are you already doing? Like, you need to understand the lay of the land. If I could just go on the zone 2 and the interval side, do you have a modality preference there? Is it running? Is it assault bike? Is it rowing? Like, what is it?
I do. I think more for my steady state. I'll either run, I'll do incline walks, like high, like 15 degrees. And I might throw that in if I'm like a bit tired and I want to get moving. Like last night was a perfect example. It was 4:00, had a long day, felt a little crappy, felt like I needed a sweat. 15 degrees, 3.5 miles per hour. Heart rate got to like 133, 135. Took a call on with someone I'm doing business with. I was on with him for like 35 minutes and dripping sweat, got off, got a great night's sleep. But like for me in that moment, running, it was like with me playing this morning, I was almost like, you know, body didn't feel 100%. I feel like that helped speed my recovery up a little bit more while still giving me the effects of training that I needed without, you know, maybe getting my lower back into extension or then going and playing hockey today. So like incline walks, running. I like the stairs for steady state. Those are probably the 3 modalities I use for steady state. Interval training, sprinting, Versa Climber, which I haven't been using as much, but I have one here. Airdyne bike, I think it's like the lowest, you know, it requires the lowest skill level. Like, I think that's the safest piece of equipment. I'm very rarely getting someone sprinting for intervals because it's such a skill set and you have to have this level of resiliency. And I think this training age when it comes to running, like it's, I haven't ran in 10 years. Let's go do sprints. But like air bike, like you can just get someone on there and it's like, okay, 15 seconds, go. It's like easy and it's safe. So I'll still mix that in. But me and my training partner, we have like this awesome hill that's probably a 1/4 mile from here. That's long. And a lot of times we'll get out there in the summertime and we're literally doing intervals up and we're walking down. And it's like, it's killer. So I think switching up these modalities for me are fun. I love running so much because it is, as you know, a plyometric, and it's a skill that I think a lot of us lose in time. And if someone has the ability to run, I'm like, don't lose that skill. If someone's like, well, I can't run, my knees are terrible, my doctor told me not to, there's so many other great ways to go out there and get it done.
And then you brought up a few times the nutrition side. So like I said, when I was in college, we had no coaching on nutrition. I would sit there, we ate absolute trash. My roommate in law school was also a Division I swimmer. And we're like, if we knew now when we were in our 30s, if we knew then what we know now on nutrition, we would have competed so differently.
Yeah.
What was your journey on nutrition? Because when you're young, you can just eat anything, but it sounded like you were thoughtful on protein consumption.
It was wild, man. I just started waking up and hearing what was good and bad and just did it. I just did it. Like, oh, this is better for you? Just did it. I remember at a really young age, my parents were like, you know, they were like, well, what do you want in your, I'm like, I'm just having this. I would go to a restaurant, filet mignon, dry, no butter, no oil. And I was like 20 years old looking at the waiter being like, no, I'm allergic to these things. And they'd be like, holy shit. Like I knew to say that at 19, 20 years old. Spinach steamed, baked potato, dry. And they would be like laughing, no salt, no taste. That's terrible. I'm like, I'm allergic. I would just make stuff up. So they would get panicked and not put it on. And I remember like one time my dad was kind of breaking my chops about it. Like, do you want me, like he was making me breakfast some morning. He's like, you want me to put cheese on your eggs or stuff like that? And I'm like, listen, man, I know this is hard for you. I'm like 19 years old saying this to him. I'm like, I know this is really hard for you to understand. I said, but I love this and I'm really good at it. And I'm going to get even better at this. And this is something that means a lot to me. So stop breaking my balls.
Yeah.
He just looked at me and he was like, holy shit. And my dad since then never like, I'll come over for dinner and they're like, it's a Saturday night. They're like, you eating clean or dirty? And I'm like, dirty, let's go. But, or whatever. Like it's that they would never even second guess me. But I think that's a conversation that people struggle to have with others. I think, if you have someone listening to you and they're like, you know what, I just don't want to drink or I don't want to eat anything bad. And the people I'm around, they just want me to do it. Like, why do they want me to do it? I'm like, well, because they feel bad for the things that you're doing that they can't do. But I think it's a conversation that you have to have with them. And I think I'm like a very direct person. Like I'll just grab someone and be like, listen, man, you asked me 3 times if I want to drink. I'm a big boy. I don't want to drink.
Right.
Like, and they're just kind of like, holy shit. Like this was back in the day. Now no one even asks me. Like, it's just, I'm out. Like if I decide to have a beer, great. But if I'm at dinner with 10 people and everyone's boozing, I'm like, water, please, lemon. And they're like, no problem. No one even like acknowledges it, looks at me, says anything. Because you got to start instilling these values and these habits. And you got to let people around you understand and know this is really important to me. And it is. Me waking up Saturday morning, tomorrow morning, and feeling great and going and training or playing hockey or doing the things I want to do. That's really, really important to me. Are there ever times during the year I'm on vacation, I'm kicking back, I'm having a fun time? Every year I've been going over to Europe with some friends to do some snowboarding. And for 1 week, we're eating incredible food and we're drinking wine and the beer over there. Oh my God, it's amazing. And do I do it? Yeah. Do I come back? I feel like shit for the 3 days? Sure. Have I ever regretted it? No. I don't regret it because I do everything else I need to do throughout the year so I can go and let my hair down and have a good time.
And that everything else you do throughout the year, I mean, what does the day-to-day, week-to-week kind of standard look like? Your kind of meal plan. Do you do 3 meals a day? Are there snacks? Do you supplement?
Yeah, I eat about 5 times a day. I look at nutrition as like opportunity. It sounds kind of weird. Like, whoa, is it 3 days? 3 times a day? Is it 4 times a day? Oh my God, I hear some people eating 8 times a day. I'm like, every time you eat, that's an opportunity for you to consume the nutrition that your body needs, right? And nutrition is either macro or micro, right? And I know certain people, like I was listening to Paul Chek the other day and he gets really in depth. He goes into the soil, things I read that he brought to my attention 25 years ago. That was just like groundbreaking, right? Things that if I talk to with the everyday consumer, I'm going to discourage the shit out of them and they're never going to, right? Exactly. But I look at every meal as like an opportunity for me to get my numbers. What are my numbers? My protein, my fats, my carbs, my fiber. And then there's obviously my micronutrient numbers. Like where are my vitamins? Where are my minerals? Where's my sodium at? Like, so I like to make sure the food I'm consuming is powerful. And if I have to get 250 grams of protein a day, or let's say 200 grams of protein a day, depending on what your weight is and depending on how much protein you're consuming, well, that's 5 meals a day, 40 grams a meal. Or that's 4 meals a day at 50 grams a meal. It's just math.
It's a math problem.
Right. It's a math problem. So, and that's probably where I run into a little bit of a problem with people who ask me about intermittent fasting. I know the research. I know the benefits to it. Most people use intermittent fasting for several different reasons. They're not doing it to clean their, to rejuvenate or clean cells and for anti-aging protocols. They're like using it as a rebound from a bad night out or a bad week out. I think Wahlberg was like, junking. I saw something recently of him like junking out for a week. And now he's like, I'm fasting for 36 hours. And I'm like, well, it may not be the best thing for you to do. It might be what you like. It might be your kickstart. Are you going to die from it? No. But when people are fasting to rebound from a bad week or a bad few days, I believe the best way to detox the body is not through starving it. It's through nutrition. When I say nutrition, I'm not meaning like just macro. Are you consuming organic foods that are fibrous, that are nutrient dense, that are powerful. If you're fasting, your window of opportunity now diminishes. Where if I'm waking up at 5 in the morning and going to bed at 9, my window of opportunity is way bigger than someone who can only eat from 1 o'clock, for the next 8 hours, right? Or 7 hours, whatever the fasting protocol is. So getting in all of that nutrition into that 8 hour window is very hard to do. And you know what? Most people aren't able to do it. So if you can't do it, then you're in a deficit, not only from a macro standpoint, but from a micro standpoint. Again, this is my viewpoint. This is how I look at things. I'm not reading off of papers right now or saying that this sports scientist said this. But if your fiber is low and your carbs are low and your fats are low and your protein's low, your body's really smart. It's not like a car where it's just going to run with the amount of gasoline it has in it till it runs out, fill it back in, it goes again. The body starts recognizing that you're deficient in these nutrients and it starts making adjustments. And a lot of times those adjustments aren't good.
I mean, what you're saying makes logical sense. The research I've seen says that intermittent fasting in and of itself, the 16-8 or whatever, you're not kicking into autophagy in that amount of time. Like the only real benefit is calorie restriction. And so if you don't need calorie restriction and you're just shutting down the time that you can, because nutrition is fuel. It is fuel. That's why we have it. It's not to avoid things. It's to put the right things in. And so if you're shutting that window, closing, that was a big thing. I did intermittent fasting for years, but once I realized the importance of protein from Dr. Lyon, like, oh, wait, no, I need a bigger window. I can't get that much in this tight a window.
I mean, I know the answer to this question because I've seen this hundreds of times, but have you ever seen someone change body composition when they increase calories?
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. I mean, I think about this. I have a woman that comes to me who's consuming 1,200 calories a day and she can't lose weight. And then we start reverse dieting them over the next few months, not over the next week. We take our time. Say their total daily energy expenditure, meaning the total amount of calories. I'm using a woman as an example. Could be a guy. It doesn't matter. But let's say Jane, her name's Jane Smith, and her total daily energy expenditure is 2,000 calories a day. Probably pretty common. A lot of people out there need 2,000 calories a day to use for energy. Let's say she's only consuming 1,200 calories, but she's put on body fat and her energy level's diminishing. What I'll do now is I might take a super, super conservative approach and over the next 8 weeks, raise it 100 calories a week, which is nothing. And in that period of time, we see that the energy level increases, her sleep quality increases, her clothes start fitting her differently. Maybe she's not losing weight in the first week or so because she might be retaining a little bit more water, but in time, things start improving. And then a year later, she's 20 or 30 pounds lighter.
Yeah.
I mean, and anyone who jumps on right now and be like, he's false, he's lying, I have the people to prove it. I've got, in my community, I have thousands, probably at this point now, tens of thousands of people that run through my challenges. And I have success stories that could turn to you, women that are like, yeah, I lost 25 pounds over the last year and a half. What was your calories then? 1,600. What is it now? 3,200. 3,200.
Wow.
Like I have women that are over 3,000 calories that will walk around in the bathing suit with abs. So yes, most of the time, do you need to be in a deficit or do we put people in deficits to lose weight? Yeah. But what happens when you're in that deficit and you're already restricting and you've been doing this for years? Like there's only one way to go. It's not south with your calories. You got to start bringing them north and you got to trust the process. So, I think these are good lessons. I think a lot of people who might listen might say, wow, that's interesting. I'm that person. Calories that are too low now throws off blood sugar levels. Now you're eating junk in the evening because you're starving and you're trying to play catch up. Now you're consuming a poor amount of calories. There's so many things that we can go in depth with, but that's something that I've been a big believer in. I'd rather try and get someone's metabolism, get their body, get their outlook on life to just go up, not remove and get them into a deficit and just, I want to look like that guy on the cover. I'm like, all right, well, that guy, maybe is just in that state for 6 to 8 weeks. Right. So I've got a different outlook on this than I think most.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's a healthy one. The more you can have that abundance mindset, not see food as an enemy, but as fuel, like you can lean into that.
Yep.
And then for you, I mean, to get 240 grams, I think you were saying was kind of your target of protein.
Actually, probably a little bit more.
Okay.
So I'm probably more at like no, I actually know what I'm at. I'm at 260 a day. But if you break it down, that's total protein. That's not all animal protein, right? So, if I weigh 215, I'm probably getting in 225 grams of animal protein. So it's just above a gram per pound of body weight. And the rest is protein through non-animal protein sources. So yeah, that's where I am. And you also got to look at it as like, if I'm burning a certain amount of calories, there's only 3 macronutrients. Like there's only 3 ways for me to drive up. Like I get to a point where like I have too much fat. I feel like I start getting fat. Like that's another thing. It's like you can eat too much of anything and you can get fat. Like it doesn't, like if I fed you, 50 pounds of chicken a day, like you're going to put on body fat. Like it's just grilled chicken. It's going to happen. And fat, like fats are healthy. I'm like, yeah, fats are healthy, but to a certain point. Carbohydrates, they're not bad. Like what carbs are you consuming? Are you consuming, candy and ice cream and things that might be like junky ice cream, not like, or are you consuming sweet potato and fibrous carbohydrates? Like carbs can be healthy, but at a certain point, like you start getting to a level of even fibrous carbs that, if you're not utilizing that fuel, bad things are going to happen. Remember Michael Phelps when he, was everyone's wondering, hey, Michael Phelps eats 12,000 calories a day. I had someone turn to me once and say, wow, could you imagine if he actually ate clean calories? And I just looked at the person, I go, yeah, he would never be able to do it. It's impossible. Like
you couldn't get that number of calories in.
No way.
Like, look, as a former swimmer, like it was impossible. I was eating Pop-Tarts, ramen noodles, anything just to get the calories in.
He had to eat General Chow's chicken.
Yeah.
He had to eat burgers and fries. Like, yeah. I ordered 5 Guys one night. It's like actually pretty awesome. Like I'll have I don't like cheese. I don't like mayo. So I'll order like 2 double burgers. I'll put some ketchup and mustard on it. I'll order a small fries because at 5 Guys, the fries are like, the small fries, like the whole bag. And like maybe sometimes a chocolate shake, but not always. That right there is like 2,000 calories. I'm like, oh my God, 2,000 calories for me is like 3 meals. Like it's a lot of food. Like I couldn't, but it goes down so easy. So, that's what
highly palatable.
Yeah. Oh, it's so delicious. It's great. Yeah.
Do you have to supplement with protein, or do you ever supplement? Or are you able to get it all from foods?
Yeah, I supplement I've done it where I don't consume protein powders. Lately I have been just for convenience, and it's just easy for me to kind of knock a shake down with other things. Like if my carbs right now have to be really high. Like I take like 100 grams of cream of rice dry and just drop it into my protein shake. It's like a cool little trick because it actually blends nicely, and I could just kind of pound that down. And right there, I got like 90 grams of carbs in with like 40, whatever it is, 42, 45 grams of protein. And I might add my fats where like I might just take an ounce of walnuts or, maybe sometimes a tablespoon of olive oil, like super quick. That might be like an emergency meal for me. Or I do something what I call mud bowls, which I might take, a cup of cooked steel cut oats where every night I make them in a slow cooker. So I put a cup of dry oats, 4 cups of water, put the top on, set it for 8 hours. And my training partner is over here every day. So like we normally have that as like either a pre-workout or depending if we're having something else post-workout meal, we'll mix, a cup of cooked oats with a half a cup of blueberries, with a tablespoon of like grounded flax seeds, with 2 scoops of, a scoop and a half of protein powder, a Greek yogurt, get some more probiotics in there. There's just things that will, and we'll mix it all into this mud bowl and you sit there and you eat it. It's delicious. So like that for me is like a really convenient, it's like cheating. It's like a convenient meal to get in. And, and then, then there's the chicken and the salmon and the grass-fed steak and the eggs and the ground turkey and, the other sources that I consume.
And you talked about it's both the macro, which we've really been focused on, and the micro. And on those, because I mean, even if you're going organic, soil quality has degraded over time. Is this something you're doing blood work on over time to see, hey, do I need a supplement here?
Yeah. I'm doing blood work. Like I'm doing blood work probably twice a year. Okay. I do it with my general practitioner just because I feel like it's kind of like your standard, have that done. And then I go to Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, who does my bloods. And that's when I think we get a lot more granular. And then she'll look at like testosterone levels and she'll look at like everything and be like, oh no, like your gut health, or she'll do a stool sample on me. And we really kind of dive into it. And fortunately I've been in a really good place. But there are things that like, I think 3-4 years ago, my total testosterone was like 630, and she measured it last year, and I was up, it was 680, and then last year she measured it, and I went up to 930. And people are like, and I've never supplemented with any type of TRT or nothing ever. Yeah. And she can, I've given her permission to talk about it with anyone, but people are like, well, how'd you do that? Is it the cold plunging? Is it the saunas? I'm like, honestly, I used to commute to the city. So there was like, I lived in the city for 14 years. And then for the next 6 years, I was commuting in and out of Manhattan. I was getting up at like 4 a.m. and I was commuting 3 hours a day. And I owned I owned 2 brick and mortars in the city. And we were up and down, every month. I had one space for 15 years. The level of stress, I think just by being able to cut that back and diminish it and build this place. And now my commute is 60 feet. It's not even a pitcher's mound from here to my front porch. And I think that 100%, it's a stress, right? It's, you start cleaning up stress.
Well,
I think
sleep, potentially, if you say,
they're both tied in, right? It's like, the sleep got a lot better, and then the stress diminished, and oh my God, you improve your sleep, and then you eliminate like 90% of your stress in your life. Like I got rid of a few toxic people in my life. And could you imagine, like, those are 3 of the most stressful things that you can deal with besides sickness, death in the family. Those are 3 of the most, I think, intense things that if you can fix, oh my God. So like when people are like, he's on something, I'm like, no, I'm not on something. I just imagine removing 15 hours of commuting a week and just in one location. It was a $2 million a year overhead for just one location that I had for 15 years, not including my other space, not including my digital company that we had, like all this other stuff. So, you start really fine tuning your life a bit and cleaning things up. I mean, good things happen.
Well, it's a virtuous cycle, right? So like the lack of sleep, it can reach your cortisol along with the stress, which impacts your sleep, which is lowering your testosterone. And then it just keeps going. But it can be a virtue. If you go the other way, it just starts ticking up together, right? And you increase by almost 50%, which is from a pretty high baseline.
It was, but that's probably where I struggle a lot with a lot of the hormone replacement therapy going on out there, because I know there's a place for this, and I really hope that these doctors are holding themselves to a very high standard, and that it's not just a money play of, oh, my T, because you hear it from everyone now, right? You know what? Are you on TRT? You know what? My doctor said I was on the low end, and I'm sitting there like this, like, you're on the low end or you're in the tank, right? Yeah, I'm on the low end. I'm like, well, thinking in my head, like, well, why are you on the low end?
It's a why, right? Like that needs, it's, if you keep seeing bodies floating down the river, go up the river. Don't just pull the bodies out, right? Like go find out who's throwing the bodies in. What's going on up there?
It's such a great, man, I'm stealing that line from you. That is a great line, but yeah, it's the truth. It's like, all right, man, like you're drinking 5 nights a week and you're getting 3 hours of sleep. Like you think this is going to help? And what do we really know about the long-term ramifications of all this stuff? I actually recently ran into there was a woman I ran into. I want to say it was at Kenny Santucci's event, the Strong New York event, which, by the way, any fitness professional listening should check that out next year. It was a lot of fun, and probably my 6th year participating and speaking. And Kenny's he's an A+ person. But there was a woman sitting there. We were having a conversation, and the woman just turned around to me and she's like, "Yeah, listen, I'm in remission. I had cancer." I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. How are you feeling?" She goes, "I'm feeling good. I'm doing well." And she turned around to me and she goes, "But I can 100% tell you it was from, steroids and things I was putting in my body in the past." And I just turned around and I didn't even say anything. But, here she started voicing her opinion, and she's like, I had doctors that were overseeing this, or a friend of a doctor, and they were telling me to take X, Y, and Z. And, I trusted them and I believed them. And, years later, my body, it took a toll on my body. Thank God I'm okay. But and when you hear that, it's just a wake up call, man. We don't know how you are going to respond to what it is this person's putting you on, and people just want these quick fixes. And I'm a slow investment type person. Like I'm trying to tell my whole life with training. They're like, "Well, what's your goal?" And I'm like, since baseball is over, like I never really had a goal. I haven't. My goal is just to be as fast and as muscular and as strong and as healthy as possible. That's my goal. Well, you have to have a goal. I'm like, really? Why do I have to have a goal? To stay motivated? Like, you're not going to meet too many people more disciplined than me. Like, I'm not going to tell you wake up every day and like, I can't wait to get to the gym. The discipline, though, is next level. And I'm going to find a way to get in there and get the work done. So why do I have to sit there and have a bench press goal or a squat goal? Why can't it just be to improve all these different categories and aspects of my life? And the older I get now, the more I realize that that's okay. But sometimes people need a goal. But the problem with that is that when they don't have the goal, then they're lost.
This, I think, is incredibly important. I'd love to talk to you on this mindset. Sure. On the goal, for some people, they use it as the motivating factor.
Right.
And then for you, for me, like, we actually love showing up at the gym. Like, we enjoy the process. And so if you have somebody who gets up, runs with their buddy, they talk, they do it every morning, and you have somebody who said, hey, I want to run my first marathon. I'm going to go train for it. The day after the marathon, who do you think is getting out of bed to go run?
Right.
It's a person who loves the process.
I know.
And so the goal could actually be detrimental to your long-term goal. Yeah, you had this short-term goal, but you're actually inhibiting your long-term goal, which is putting more years into your life.
I know.
Putting more life into each of those years.
I totally agree with you. It's like, what's next? I will be honest, though. When I had a cover to get ready for, and I never had more than 5 weeks to get ready for a cover. It was always like, I was probably like the last guy on the list that they were like, we need someone for this cover called Don. Right. And so I'm like, but I knew how to, like, I was always kind of ready. So when it was time to really get ready, I'm like, it's game time. And for me, I loved that pressure. Like, I just loved, knowing that I had this amount of time, and what I was doing was just tightening everything up that I would normally do. It's like, all right, well, maybe that occasional weekly or cheat meal every 2 weeks, gone, right? Macros dialed in, fats come down a little bit, carbs might come down just a hair, protein will kind of maintain. With training now, does anything really change? No. I don't start running around in circuits like people would think you're doing, because I'm natural. I have to keep the lifts heavy, because if I don't, I feel like my body gets very flat. I feel like my muscles start deflating. So I know, like, a week out from a shoot, like, I'm deadlifting over 500 pounds. I'm doing things that, like, most people are like, no, you shouldn't do that. I'm like, no, I'm just, I know what, like, if I'm sitting there just doing like pump work all the time, my body loses that fullness. So, there's things that I would recommend even my actors to do. Like, a main goal for me and my actors is strength. It's resiliency. It's, when Ryan's shooting Deadpool, it is my number one goal with him is like, how strong is your body? And I don't mean bench press, but he's a lunatic. He does his own stunts. He's jumping through windows. He's doing all this crazy. So my number one goal is like energy and resiliency. The body composition part with him, I'm like, oh my God, the guy's a robot. He's a dream to work with. It's like, all right, you ready to go? Do we know what we have to do? He's like, yeah. And it's like, I'm checking in once in a while. I don't even need to, because he just has his stuff and he goes. It's that easy with him. Other people might need some more hand holding, and that's fine. They're like, oh, are you sure I can't have a cheat meal? I'm like, you can't have one right now. Like, what's your goal? Like, you have 5 weeks to get ready. You don't have 9 months to get ready. If you have 9 months to get ready, 100%, I want you to keep your sanity. You have 5 weeks, and you're going to be on the cover of Muscle and Fitness. What's it to you? Is that slice of pizza really, those 2 slices of pizza really that important to you, where you probably will be holding a little bit of water, but I should live a little bit? Like, sure, dude.
You can't wait 5 weeks.
You can't wait 5 weeks. Like, exactly. Like, I love, people used to say that to me, like, oh, don't you want to live a little? I'm like, I live a lot. Like, when I want to go eat and I want to go do something, guys, I do it. But otherwise, if I do it too much, I don't feel good. I get anxiety, actually. Like, my heart rate starts elevating. I don't feel right. I don't feel healthy. And it affects my day. I am at my best when I am like on that path of like, keep going.
Yeah, I mean, most people don't know what it's like to live with vitality, right? They define health as this absence of disease. I don't have cancer. I don't have diabetes. I'm healthy. That is different living at the 50th percentile than the 95th percentile. When you hop up out of bed, when people are like, oh my God, you can just get out of bed like that? I'm like, yeah, I'm excited for the day. I have the energy. I'm ready to go. It's a different way to live. You
just reminded me of a story. I had a buddy of mine who, big drinker and big foodie, big guy. And he would probably this is an issue there. He'd probably have about a bottle of wine a night. And his wife would sit down and they would hit it. So that's nine bottles. He'd probably have about 7 to 9 bottles a week because the weekends they would get picked up. So I look at him, how do you feel in the morning? He's like, fine. So he ended up backing off drinking. And I remember I met him at the gym on a Saturday morning and he woke up, he goes, I feel unbelievable. I go, why? He goes, I didn't drink last night. I didn't realize how shitty I was feeling. Even that one drink, it's just your baseline. It's like, that's all he knew. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. Like he just got and it makes sense. He just got so used to waking up and operating under these terms. And then suddenly he put himself into a new environment. And that's the magic of all this, right? I see this happen with everyone. They start veering away from the things that make them feel really bad. And they come in here and they're like, I feel great. I feel great. And then they veer back. And they're like, I'm depressed. I feel terrible. I'm like, well, look at what you changed back to. I'm like, and I turned to someone the other day and I said, it's going to get to a point with you where you're going to feel so awful and so shitty every time you go back to it, you're just going to quit. And he just looked at me and he goes, you're right. I'm feeling it already. Because every time I do it, it's just not worth it. My hope with people is not for them to quit the drinking and quit, the food entirely. It's just to know when to turn it on and off. That's it.
And to feel what's possible, right? Because once you feel it, you can't unknow that.
Yeah.
On the mindset side, so the way you describe it, it sounds very similar to kind of my approach. My roommate from college, who was a national champion swimmer as well, in that once you hear something and you know it's the right thing, you do the thing. You're like, this is the right thing. I'm going to go do that. Now, it sounds like you came out of the box like that. Like this, you were doing this kind of at 16. You're like, oh, I need to go get Britain. Let's go get the meatballs.
I got lucky.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely like.
I got lucky. I just loved it. I just loved it. I just loved it out of the gate. Yeah, I got lucky.
But you're dealing with a lot of clients, right? You have Ryan, but then you have others that they have a much harder time with that. What are some mindset practices that you found helpful?
It's a great question. I think the thing that's worked for everyone is taking that minimalistic approach, right? Like if I sit down, like if any person listening to this right now, and I said, listen, can we sit down and find, this is your average person. Can we sit down and find 6 things, 12 things, whatever it is, that if we changed in your life, it would really change the trajectory of your health? And suddenly someone's like, yeah, let's go through it. You know what? I'm not that consistent with my water. I don't drink enough water. I don't get enough protein. I don't exercise enough. I don't get any steps in. My sleep's poor. I get no vegetables. Like that's 6. Yeah, I call these like NSVs, like non-scale victories, that any 6 of these, if you could start incorporating them in, like good things are going to happen. So rather than me turning around to someone and being like, here, get on it now, all 6, I might say like, listen, man, like let's be really consistent with the water this month. And let's just teach yourself to, what else? Honestly, right now, just go with the water. I just want the water, and then they start drinking water and they become consistent. And they're like, that's one thing that they have to focus on. And like a week or 2 in, they're like, I'm nailing the water. I actually enjoy this. I'm carrying around my Yeti, 2 of these a day and I'm done. Oh my God, I'm never going to change this. What's next? And I'm like, all right, you know what? Let's start getting that step number up. And there's no specific order. I probably would go with water first because water is the only thing that I think is like a non-negotiable. Like I love when people are like, there are no non-negotiables. I'm like, water's a non-negotiable. Like
70% water. We have to have it.
Do not walk around dehydrated. Please. Of course, there's a non-negotiable. Water is one of them. And next, like, okay, let's choose our steps. Well, is it 10,000 a day? Well, where are you at right now? I'm at 4,000. Well, 10,000 is probably going to be impossible. So let's do this. Walk 10 minutes after 3 meals that you're having and tell me where you're at. And they're suddenly like, oh my God, I'm at 6,000 a day. Like, great. Like, let's build up from there. And I spend the next month now building their steps up to where they feel like they have ownership over it. And what I'm going to do is rather than throwing everything at someone like this New Year's resolution, I got to be perfect. I'm going to kind of give them little homework assignments over time. And then in 6 months, I'm going to correct 6 massive non-scale victories in their life that are going to change their trajectory with their health and wellness.
Yeah. I mean, what I love about it, there are 2 big things I think that you're doing there. One is the agency that they're identifying. They went and said, hey, here are the things that I can do. Like, great, you created the menu. So you have agency ownership in this. And the other is that don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Lower the bar on the start. Because once you start building the momentum, you want to keep going. Whereas if you try all 6 and you fail, you're like, well, I can't do it, right? Then you start creating a different story in your head.
It's going to happen soon. We're at the time of year. What's today's date? Today's the 6th. So in about, 25, 26 days, Jan 1's going to hit. And everyone's like, here we go. Let's dive into it. And what's that day? What is it? January 13th is like Quitter's Day or something like that.
What's it that early? I was going to say it's February. They don't even get out of January?
No, I don't even think they get out of January. I might be wrong. I thought it was really soon. Let's say it's February. I don't care. But Quitter's Day is it's so soon after Jan 1. It's just like stop trying to give up, pizza and chocolate cake and junk food, like things that you might enjoy. Let's just minimize it. Let's allow you to have some motivation becomes so much easier when you start showing someone progress. Yeah. Discipline, I always take discipline over motivation because I think discipline is like, all right, I'm not motivated today, but I'm going to do this. So I always take discipline over motivation. But I think when you start looking at yourself, or you start looking at blood numbers or like your markers, and you're going in yearly and your doctor's like, what are you doing? Your body composition's improved. Your weight loss has gotten better, has improved. Like everything looks better. Oh my God, you look better. You look healthier. Like that starts becoming very motivating for each person. So I just think it's not hard, but I think most people out there are biting off way more than they can chew. And then when, not if, when they don't go and do what they say they want to do, then they're just like, oh, I failed and here we go again. It's just the same
the story
thing.
is I can't do it, right? Like then it's this kind of the fixed mindset. Right. I want to be respectful of your time, but if you have a minute, I really would love to get your thoughts on the social connection aspect, because you talked at the beginning about losing people in your life and the impact that can have. And the flip side, so much of what you do is about building community,
right?
And what the role of that is in your life and how you incorporate it.
What's interesting? I look at everything I've done in my career, and it was all about community, right? Like when I got my first job at a big box gym, why was that big box gym successful? They all have the same equipment. Like they're either going with Life Fitness, Hammer Strength, Cybex, whatever it was at the time. It's like the same equipment. Aesthetically, someone's always going to create something cooler looking, or a new architect's going to come in and put a different design in there. Like what made these places special was the community they developed, right? So I learned that at a really young age, back into my catering days, walking into a party and seeing that community come together, people come together who had good energy. That's why parties were fun. Like, does it help that the food's good? Alcohol's all the same, right? People were, at the time, back in my day, they were drinking Absolute vodka and Smirnoff. There was no, it's like I'm dating myself now, but like the alcohol was the same. So like, was it the alcohol? No, it was the people. So that's what I would see with parties. People would come in and out of nowhere, you'd be like, oh man, this place is going to go off soon. These people are like, they are ready to have a good time. And you'd see it and it was like, boom, that's what happened. And for me, I felt like community, I became such a community driven person. Not where I'm like a rah coach. I'm not. I'm like, I might just get in your face and kind of whisper something to you and be like, listen, like, I know you came in here feeling like shit. I know what's going on, but I'm really proud of what you're doing right now. And just let's keep it going. And they would just kind of look at me. And it was those words. It wasn't like, come on, man, dig deep. It's like, this just wasn't my style. So, I think that community aspect, even when I got to Drive and I opened my club, Drive 495 back in 2005, we had, out of any gym I've ever been to, there was a reason why we had all these celebrities coming in, right? Because they felt safe and they came in here to this spot and they felt like they were part of a community. They actually went in there and they weren't worried about someone asking for autographs or pulling out a phone. I would throw them out. I had one woman once took a picture of Jim Parsons and I pulled her into the office with my manager and I said, listen, I understand what you're doing. You do that again and I'm going to, refund your deposit and you're out of here. And she was like, but. I'm like, there's no buts. This is the rule. I apologize. I'm being harsh to you right now. But if you start doing it, everyone's going to do it. We can't do it. So, that community piece and culture piece was massive, to the point that when I was forced to close, funny story, I was forced to close March 16th of 2020. My 15-year lease expired May 31st of 2020. Like, what are the chances? I don't know anyone. A 15-year
15
lease. I paid the landlord 3 months. I was trying to renegotiate my lease. And at that point, I started my challenges. I relaunched my digital business. It ended up doing very well to the point where there was just a new focus for me in my life. But when I launched these challenges, I brought this community aspect of drive, right? This energy, these people to a very scalable platform. I'm in 80 countries now. So bringing everyone to Facebook and doing these live calls where I would sometimes be on a call for 3 hours and 15 minutes talking to everyone. There would be 1,000 people on a Zoom call and I'd be answering questions and people would be laughing and I would be hosting deck of pain challenges, which was a push-up challenge where I have my deck of cards here once a month and I pull a number up. Guys are up first, three push-ups. Ladies are up next. Ace, that's Sebastian Stan, that's 11 push-ups. And we would go through and we'd run through that. And I'd bring on different guests and developing that community piece at a time where people really needed it. They were stranded in their apartments, in their homes. They were scared shitless. People were coming to their doors and they had their masks on and they were waving to family members. I remember going to my parents' house.
Yeah.
And through a window waving at them and everyone had tears in their eyes because I'm looking at my parents who are in their 70s. And you're like, this is terrible. Like, there's a pane of glass separating my mom and dad right now. They were emotional. It got me emotional. I get emotional even thinking about it right now. It's like to remove that connection, the ability to hug someone and feel their skin and be in their presence. That was something we all lost for a period of time. And you know what? We didn't know when we were getting it back. So at that time, I launched something that allowed people who didn't have that connection to connect with others. And then, launching my retreats. We're going into my 5th year, DonCon. We've had 100 people a week show up. And, just to get people and to be in a pool with someone who's, they're not a celebrity. I was sitting next to a woman last year. I'm like, what do you do for a living? She's like, I've been a manager at Stop and Shop for 25 years. I got to save up all year for this. I love you. And I'm like, I love you too. Like, this is great. Like, yeah, how happy that made me to see how this is something really important for someone and how I'm able to help bring people together. Just help. I'm not saying allow them to, but like just help in them living a better quality of life. And that's all it is that I'm trying to do at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly in the depths of the pandemic. It was more extreme, but we know we're in a loneliness epidemic in general.
Yeah.
And so the unlock for most people, you're in this crowded room, but never felt more alone. So to build that community, we know if you find a sense of belonging in group exercise, you have a 20% boost in your well-being, right? There is something magical, right? You were a team athlete, right? You played on the sports team. There's something magical of going through that together and what you're doing with your challenges, with your community. I mean, it really is a gift.
No, thank you. But you see it now with group training. I'm never going to be one to bash anything like, oh, CrossFit sucks. Like, no, like, you know what? I have friends of mine that ran really good CrossFit boxes and they would screen people. I'm like, guess what? You got good restaurants, you got bad restaurants. You got good trainers, you got bad trainers. You got terrible CrossFit approaches and CrossFit boxes out there, and you have really good ones. It's like anything else in life. But it's fascinating to me how you can be running just like a terrible program where you just walk in and be like, what is this person doing? Like, they just had ACL surgery and you're throwing a bar in their back and you're making them sprint on a treadmill and they're complaining about pain. Or, you're in a yoga class saying, my knees hurt. And the yoga instructor's going, that's the pain and the bad energy leaving your knees. Like, no, this person just had ACL surgery. Like,
I tore my meniscus in both knees in yoga class doing that. They're like, no,
keep going. So it's like, all right, like, but why do a lot of people go, why do they go back? They go back for this feeling that they're receiving. I just, like anything else, when someone asks me, do you like restaurants? I'm like, what kind of question is that? I like good restaurants. Like, I like food, like high quality food. And I especially like a restaurant that's healthy, but I feel like I'm maybe not eating something healthy. And there's like, they can back up, like, this is certified organic and we use this instead of this, and like makes me feel good. But, it's like, is yoga bad? No, yoga's not bad. It's yoga from bad yoga instructors is bad. And is CrossFit bad? No, CrossFit's not bad. Like, look at the moves. What are they doing in CrossFit? They're doing Olympic lifting. They're doing airline bike. They're running. They're throwing. They're doing battle ropes. Like, are any of these things really bad? Maybe a jerk going overhead for someone who just had shoulder surgery. Yeah, not a good decision. That's the problem that I have with things. So yeah, am I a bit of a purist? I don't really call that being a purist. I just call that smart training and saying, understand that whatever modality you do, whatever it is you do, ask yourself a question. Are you enjoying it? Is it working? And how does your body feel? Think about that. Like, are you enjoying it? Is it working? And how does your body feel? Oh my God, I love it. Great community. Is your body improving? Body comp's been improving a bunch. How does your body feel? Like shit. My knees are killing me. My elbows are killing me. My shoulders killing me. I can't get out of bed in the morning. There's a problem. Yeah. And if any of those answers changed, like, you know what? I feel great and I'm looking great. Are you enjoying your training? I absolutely hate it. Every time I'm getting out of bed to go see this coach, I am miserable. What's the point of that?
It's also not sustainable, right?
It's not.
Is it effective and is it sustainable? And that's what those three questions get to. Like, okay, if you do it, then are you going to fall off and for 8 months do nothing? Like when people say, hey, I hate exercise. What do you mean? Well, I hate running. Like, no. You're saying you hate running.
Running, right.
There's so many other ways to move your body.
And what type of running? And let's take it up a notch here. What type of running do you hate? Oh my God, my last coach was making me run 10 miles a clip. Well, have you tried sprinting? Have we worked on that? And the next thing you know, they start working with Derek Hansen, world-renowned sprint coach, and they're like, oh my God, I love this. My body composition is changing. My body feels light and fast. And oh my God, those tight hamstrings I have are gone now. It's like, so yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah. Well, Don, this has been phenomenal.
Hey man, you're easy to talk to. You're easy to talk to. You got a great, this is fantastic. Congratulations. Thank you for having me on. You're going to do great with this. You're very, very good questions, and I could have spoken to you for another hour. But
I appreciate it. Before we sign off, if we've covered a bunch of things. Obviously, this has been a multi-decade process for you. For someone listening to this, it might be intimidating. Back to when you were saying, "Hey, identify 6. Let's just start with 1."
Yeah.
Where would you suggest someone start?
Listen, like I said, that non-negotiable is hydration. So if you're not doing that, like as well as I do, that getting the right amount of water is life-changing in itself. And it's that basic. I would just half your body weight in ounces, sure. Like it's if you're a little over, fine, big deal. But I think hydration is that one non-negotiable. After that, movement, right? After that, maybe not completely eliminating the things that you love, but having some type of a compromise. If you ate, a pizza pie 365 days a year last year, maybe do it every other day. But that's what I'm trying to show them. Like, let's just maybe do it every third day. Over a year, were you able to improve things and move it in the right direction? I can assure you guys, if for anyone who's listening that struggled, take a minimalistic approach, build some momentum, and tell yourself, when I have that day where I fall off or I go do what it wasn't, it's part of the plan. Yeah. Right? It's like, am I going to tell you 365 days last year? Was I dehydrated one day? Maybe. I think there was one day where I probably was a bit, because I remember that day. I remember I played ice hockey. It was we called it a day of greatness. I played ice hockey. I worked out. I played golf. I had 18 holes. I got back here. I jumped in a sauna. I jumped into a plunge. I just didn't have enough. I remember I started getting a headache. I was like, oh my God, I'm actually dehydrated. Right. And I caught that quick. Things are going to happen and you get back on it. That's just one day in a year. But that's what I'm trying to say. Don't look at it when you veer off track, use it as a learning curve, get back on.
Yeah, that's a great way to close. Thank you, not just for today, not just for the workouts, eudaimonia, but for everything you do and have done for decades.
I appreciate it. Back at you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Home of Healthspan podcast. And remember, you can always find the products, practices, and routines mentioned by today's guests, as well as many other Healthspan role models on alively.com. Enjoy a lively day.